Welcome back to our channel. In a quiet pocket of American history, nestled between the winding down of the Vietnam War and the high-energy disco era of the late 1970s, there existed a simple piece of metal. Small, unassuming, and often overlooked, it slipped through fingers, dropped into vending machines, and jingled in pockets across the country. A dime. Not just any dime, but one minted in 1978, a year of transitions, uncertainties, and subtle changes that would, unknowingly, set the stage for one of the most intriguing stories in modern numismatics. The 1970s in America were defined by shifting landscapes, political, cultural, and economic. The country was still healing from the wounds of Watergate, and inflation loomed large. Jimmy Carter sat in the Oval Office, striving to bring honesty and humility back to Washington. The music charts were topped by the Bee Gees and Queen, and the silver screen was dominated by the likes of Grease and Superman. It was a time of flared jeans, feathered hair, and that peculiar blend of hope and disillusionment that defined a generation caught between tradition and transformation. And in the midst of it all, the United States Mint continued its work, methodically striking coins for circulation. Among these was the 1978 Roosevelt Dime, named for the beloved 32nd President, Franklin D. Roosevelt, whose image had graced the 10-cent piece since 1946. His face, cast in profile, had become a staple of everyday commerce. Most people saw it without really seeing it, passing it along with spare change, never suspecting that one among the millions bore a secret far more valuable than its face suggested. To the average observer, the 1978 dime looked no different than any other: a small, copper-nickel coin with a reeded edge, a dignified presidential profile on the obverse, and a torch flanked by olive and oak branches on the reverse, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. But buried within the details, hidden beneath layers of routine and mass production, was a tiny anomaly. A whisper of a difference that, when recognized by trained eyes and expert hands, would transform this common coin into a collector's holy grail. That's the strange magic of numismatics, the study and collection of coins. What seems ordinary becomes extraordinary with the right lens. A slight shift in die alignment, an error in planchet composition, or an unusually sharp strike can elevate a coin from everyday currency to historical treasure. And this is precisely the path the 1978 dime would take, one struck not just with metal, but with destiny. The United States Mint, by 1978, was operating multiple facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco among them. Each mint left subtle clues on the coins it produced, typically in the form of a small letter, P for Philadelphia, D for Denver, and S for San Francisco. For the trained numismatist, these mint marks were more than just letters. They were signatures, each with its own quirks, quality controls, and histories. But in 1978, some of these signatures would quietly go astray. And that's where our story deepens. There is a certain romance to rarity. It's the idea that out of countless millions, one or two might be different. And those differences, when paired with time and the right amount of curiosity, can create legends. Imagine a coin that spent decades in circulation, passed through the hands of countless people, never drawing attention until one day, someone looks a little closer. They notice something odd. The weight is just slightly off. The lettering, ever so faintly, looks different. The relief seems unusually crisp. That moment of sudden realization, of discovery, that's the pulse of the collector's world. And it's the heartbeat of this dime's journey. As the years rolled on, this particular 1978 dime continued to elude detection. It was no shiny proof coin stored away in a collector's folder. It wasn't preserved in a velvet-lined case or sealed behind acrylic. No, this coin lived among the people. It bought coffees in newspapers. It may have sat in a tip jar or helped a child buy candy. It was loved, used, perhaps even forgotten. But eventually, it would be found. And when it was, it would change everything. Absolutely. Here's the next section of the script, continuing the immersive, storytelling tone. The dime's journey was not unlike a traveler moving through time. It saw the changing faces of America, rode the dusty dashboards of pickup trucks, and slipped through the cracks of worn denim pockets. While the world around it shifted, from rotary phones to digital displays, from black and white TVs to booming color, this little coin quietly bore witness. All the while, no one noticed it was different. Somewhere in its worn surface lay the key to its uniqueness. The thing is, coins are born in moments of high precision, forged in heat and pressure, and shaped by hardened steel dies that stamp life into blank metal discs. But humans, yes, even the most skilled and careful, are not infallible. And in 1978, amid the whir of mint machinery and the relentless rhythm of mass production, a tiny error slipped through. An anomaly. A fluke. For a long time, it was assumed all 1978 dimes were the same. Why wouldn't they be? Over 800 million were minted between Philadelphia and Denver alone that year. That's more than enough to blur the lines between the exceptional and the mundane. But hidden among the hundreds of millions, a few were struck in a way that defied expectation. Some bore imperfections that would later be recognized not as flaws, but as signatures of rarity. Collectors live for these subtleties. A shifted mint mark. A doubling of the date. An unintentional overstrike or a misaligned die. These things are not mistakes, they're stories. Each imperfection is a breadcrumb that leads to something rare, something valuable. And in the case of our dime, the story grew even more mysterious. The earliest whisper of its uniqueness didn't come from a flashy auction or a collector's exhibit. It came from a quiet moment. One person, perhaps an amateur hobbyist, maybe just a curious soul with a magnifying glass and a box of change. They paused. Tilted the coin in the light. And then they saw it. A tiny difference in the way the surface reflected light. The fine details of Roosevelt's hair, unusually sharp and well-defined. The relief of the coin was strikingly deep, the lettering crisp, the edges sharp. Something about it stood apart, like a voice cutting through static. Of course, not every rare coin makes itself known immediately. Many spend years in collections, only to be re-examined later and recognized for their worth. That's part of what makes the hobby of coin collecting so exciting. Every drawer, every piggy bank, every dusty box in the attic holds the potential for treasure. And sometimes, it isn't the coin itself that changes, but the way we look at it. Word began to spread, slowly at first. A few specialists began to pay closer attention to the 1978 dimes. Some were heavier than expected. Some had an unusual shine, a curious sound when dropped on a hard surface. Forensic eyes in the numismatic world began to zero in, comparing these coins under microscopes, cross-referencing strike patterns and die pairs. Patterns emerged. And then came the moment of confirmation. It turned out that a very small batch of these dimes, minted under unusual conditions, had not only survived but had circulated for decades without being detected. Their rarity didn't stem from some grand design, but from a perfect storm of factors: a minting process that briefly veered off script, a die that wasn't supposed to be used, or perhaps even an experimental planchet slipping into production. Whatever the reason, the result was undeniable. Collectors started whispering about a specific variety, one that was different enough to command attention, but subtle enough to have avoided notice for years. And as more experts weighed in, the buzz grew louder. This wasn't just an error coin. It was a survivor. A symbol of rarity forged in a sea of sameness. And then, something curious happened. The first one to surface didn't do so in the display case of a high-end dealer or the glass box of a museum. It appeared in the most unlikely of places: change given back from a corner store, a pile of loose coins saved in an old mason jar. That's the magic of this story. The coin wasn't discovered by a millionaire or a seasoned professional. It was found by someone with curiosity and patience, someone who took the time to look a little closer. When it was finally authenticated, the numismatic world stood still. Experts confirmed its legitimacy, noting characteristics that matched no known regular strike. Its features aligned with a set of nearly mythic diagnostics that had long been theorized but never proven. The coin was real. And it was spectacular. But here's the thing about value: it isn't always immediate. It builds, brick by brick, with every confirmation, every discussion, every article and video that brings it into the light. As more collectors learned about this unique 1978 dime, the desire to find another grew exponentially. People who hadn't thought twice about dimes now found themselves combing through their change, hoping lightning would strike twice. And while many coins can be rare, not all are loved. This one, however, had both rarity and charm. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't gilded in gold. It was humble. Modest. But in its humility lay its strength. It was a reminder that sometimes, the most valuable things are those that blend in so perfectly, we forget to see them. In the tapestry of American life, there are stories that live not in books or headlines, but in the pockets of the people. Among the paper bills and jingling coins we so casually toss into trays and jars, lie whispers of history, quiet and enduring. One such whisper began in 1981, not with fanfare or drama, but with the gentle ring of a coin hitting the bottom of a cash register. It was a dime. Just 10 cents. Light, ordinary, forgettable. Or so it seemed. America in 1981 was a nation at a crossroads. A new president, Ronald Reagan, had just taken the oath of office, bringing with him promises of renewal, strength, and a fresh conservative era. The country was grappling with inflation, energy crises, and the tail end of the Cold War's icy grip. MTV hadn't yet aired its first video, but the personal computer was knocking on every door, hinting at a revolution to come. Change was in the air, in politics, in technology, in culture. And somewhere, in the background of all that change, a coin was born. It rolled out of the US mince machines like so many others before it. Made from copper and nickel, it bore the familiar face of Franklin D. Roosevelt on its obverse, a tribute to a leader who had guided the nation through its darkest economic hours and a world war. His profile had become more than familiar, it was emblematic of stability, of resilience. On the reverse, a torch flanked by branches of olive and oak, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. The 1981 Roosevelt Dime was never meant to be remarkable. But fate had other plans. Most coins live quiet lives. They serve. They circulate. They age. But every so often, one breaks the mold, not through design, but through anomaly. And this 1981 dime, seemingly unremarkable in every way, was touched by that strange alchemy of timing, error, and survival that transforms a common coin into a legendary one. It's hard to say exactly when the first clue appeared. Maybe someone noticed it in passing, the way the coin caught the light. Maybe it was the sound it made, a brighter ring when dropped on glass, a slight difference that pricked the senses. Or maybe it was the way the details stood out, sharper, bolder, unusually precise. Whatever it was, it started small. Just a feeling. Just a question. The United States Mint, in 1981, was a machine of efficiency. Coins were produced by the hundreds of millions, split across facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Quality control was strict, but not infallible. Sometimes, in the haste of production or the complexity of machinery, a variation slipped through. Most were corrected before they reached the public. But not always. There's a kind of romance to the idea of a mistake going unnoticed. It's the crack in the wall that becomes a passage. A deviation that becomes a clue. And for the right eyes, those with patience, curiosity, and just enough luck, that clue can be worth more than gold. This 1981 dime, the one that would later send ripples through the numismatic world, bore such a clue. A quiet defect, invisible to the untrained eye. Perhaps it was a difference in the die used to strike it. Perhaps the planchet, the blank metal disc, wasn't quite the same. Maybe it was even struck twice, or with a misaligned die. These variations are rare, and often dismissed. But in the world of coin collecting, they are everything. Collectors understand something that most people forget, that every coin has a story. Not just the story of what it can buy, but the story of how it came to be. The errors, the craftsmanship, the decisions behind the scenes. And the 1981 dime that emerged as extraordinary was, by all accounts, the result of a perfect storm. A moment when everything went just slightly wrong, and in doing so, created something so right. Years passed before its rarity was understood. It traveled through hands, through towns, through moments of daily life. It may have been used to buy a soda, to pay a meter, to rest in a change tray at the edge of a diner's counter. It was not hidden away or protected, it was part of the world. And that made its survival even more remarkable. When it finally came to light, the reaction was not immediate. It began, as these things often do, with whispers in collector circles. A few sharp-eyed numismatists noticed similarities between certain 1981 dimes that didn't quite match the rest. The texture. The depth. The weight. Some had slightly different dimensions, or bore evidence of rare striking patterns. The more they were studied, the clearer the picture became. These were not ordinary. The confirmation came slowly, piece by piece. One coin authenticated. Then another. Each time, the pattern grew stronger. A few dozen, perhaps even fewer, matched the unique markers. They came from different parts of the country, found by different people, but they shared something rare, something unmistakable. And in the world of collecting, rarity plus condition equals desire. Passion. Competition. This particular 1981 dime, its finest known example, was pristine. Preserved by chance, perhaps through a forgotten drawer or a sealed coin roll left untouched for years. Its condition was nearly flawless, and the markers of its rarity all aligned. It was no longer just a dime. It was a piece of history, and it was only a matter of time before someone recognized what they held in their hand wasn't worth 10 cents. Not even 100. Not even 1,000. The true value of this coin was something else entirely. It was a mirror of a moment, a glitch in the system that gave birth to a collector's dream. Absolutely, let's keep the story flowing. Here's the next section of the 1981 USA 1 dime coin script. Some say coins carry energy, absorbing it from the hands they pass through, the places they've been. If that's true, then this 1981 dime carried decades of unnoticed value, a slumbering gem hiding in plain sight. The truth about this coin wasn't obvious. It took time, attention, and a little bit of obsession. But once the pieces fell into place, there was no denying what it had become. Part of what makes its journey so captivating is how long it remained in the shadows. Imagine how many people had it in their possession without a clue. A cashier might have handed it out without thinking. A child could have dropped it into a toy machine. It may have sat at the bottom of a fountain, wished upon and forgotten. That's the paradox of great rarities. They don't start rare. They become rare, over time, through survival. What separated this dime from the rest wasn't immediately visible. To most, it looked like any other, same weight, same color, same face. But a closer inspection revealed secrets: slight doubling in the lettering, a deeper than usual strike around the date, and edges that were unexpectedly sharp, almost proof-like in quality despite not being an official proof coin. The combination of these features pointed to something unusual, possibly an early die state strike, a coin struck before the dies became worn. And that's the kind of detail collectors dream about, but details are only part of the equation. Rarity matters, yes. But condition? Condition is everything. This coin, this 1981 dime that would come to hold staggering value, was in a state of preservation that defied its journey. Barely worn. Its luster intact. It was as if it had been pulled from circulation moments after it was struck and then tucked away by fate itself. That's not just luck, it's numismatic poetry. Soon, word began to spread. Collector forums lit up with questions. Could there be more out there? How could something so small, so seemingly unimportant, be worth so much? People began sifting through change again, not just as a habit, but with purpose. They looked closer at their coins, learning to read the language of mint marks and strike quality. The 1981 dime had awakened a new wave of curiosity. It's strange to think about, isn't it? That a coin so familiar could hold such mystery. That a piece of metal, smaller than a quarter and so often discarded or dropped into tip jars, could rival the price of a luxury car or a down payment on a house. But it's true. Because once this particular coin was recognized for what it truly was, once it was certified, examined, and declared to be among the finest and rarest of its kind, it entered a new realm, and then came the attention. Quiet at first, then louder. Experts weighed in. Publications wrote about it. Collectors began looking at 1,981 dimes with new eyes, hunting for the same rare markers. But few matched. Fewer still were in the same pristine state. The coin's mystique only grew. It's hard to explain the feeling of holding something like that in your hand. The weight isn't just physical, it's historical. Emotional. You're holding not just a coin, but a fluke of fate. A mistake that survived. A piece of American history that no one was supposed to notice, and yet, here it was. Gleaming. Silent. Powerful. For many, the story of the 1981 dime is more than just a tale of rarity. It's a reminder that in our everyday lives, the extraordinary often hides in plain sight. We pass by treasures every day, blind to their value until we learn to see differently. Until we learn to look just a little closer, and so, after years of travel, mystery, and unnoticed brilliance, the dime that began its life in 1981 would finally find its place. Not in a cash register, but in the hands of someone who understood its true worth. A collector. A seeker. A storyteller. And they wouldn't let it slip by, because they knew what it was. They knew what it meant, and they knew, more than anything, what it was worth. It began like countless others, a coin, light as breath, tossed into the hands of a cashier, a tip jar, a vending machine. It jingled quietly, modest and unnoticed, part of the steady flow of daily life in 1995. No one gave it a second glance. After all, it was just a dime. Just 10 cents, but the thing about ordinary things is that they sometimes carry the most extraordinary stories. America in 1995 was a country buzzing with optimism. The economy was strong, the internet was beginning to find its way into homes, and a new era of communication had begun to unfold. People were dialing up, logging in, and stepping into a digital future. Meanwhile, in pockets and purses, the coins of the past still clinked along for the ride. At the US Mint, production ran smoothly. Billions of coins were being struck with flawless repetition. The Roosevelt Dime, introduced in 1946, remained a symbol of continuity. It bore the same profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt, solemn and strong, facing left, a torch on the reverse flanked by olive and oak branches. It was familiar. Trustworthy. The kind of design people saw so often, they stopped seeing it at all, but somewhere in the steady, metallic rhythm of that year's production, amid the precision of machines and the watchful eyes of workers, something happened, not a dramatic error. Not something that screamed for attention. No, this was more subtle. Quiet. It began with a detail a fraction of a millimeter off, a difference almost invisible to the untrained eye. But it was there. A misalignment, a slight doubling in the date, a strike pattern that didn't quite match the rest. Just enough to make someone pause. At first, no one noticed. Why would they? It looked like every other dime. And to most people, it was. But the truth is, rarity hides. It doesn't announce itself. It waits for the right person, the right moment, the right eyes. Years passed. The 1995 dime moved through time like any other coin. It passed between fingers, across counters, into pockets. It was dropped in laundromats, left as change at fast food restaurants, buried beneath car seats. And then, it vanished, just like millions of others. Or so it seemed. What makes this particular dime story remarkable isn't just the way it was made. It's the way it survived. You see, somewhere along the line, someone looked closer. Maybe they were a collector. Maybe just someone curious. But they saw something others had missed. A depth to the design. A sharpness to the lettering. An unusual weight, perhaps. A ring that didn't match other coins when tapped on glass. They tilted it under the light, and suddenly, it was as if the coin was speaking, and what it said was, "Look again." That moment of discovery, of realization, is what drives collectors. The chance that something ordinary might not be. That a mistake might actually be a miracle. And when that coin was finally examined, its secrets unraveled one by one. It turned out this dime wasn't just another 1995 issue. It had markers that didn't match the typical die used that year. A unique combination of misstrike and early die state made it a 1 in millions anomaly. Word spread slowly at first, trickling through coin forums and hobby circles. But as more eyes studied it, more experts confirmed what had been suspected all along. This wasn't just rare, it was astonishing. A few more surfaced. Just a handful. Most had been damaged by circulation. But one stood apart, nearly perfect, untouched by time. It had the same features, the same mysterious markers, but it was crisp. Clean. Untouched. It was that one dime, the standout, the survivor. Its origin? Still unclear. Was it struck using a retired proof die? Was it an experimental run that slipped into general circulation? Theories bloomed like wildflowers. But the facts remained: this dime wasn't supposed to exist in the form it did. And yet, it did. Collectors began combing through their 1995 change. For years, the dime had been passed over, overshadowed by flashier denominations. Now, it was at the center of a quiet storm. People pulled jars off shelves, searched old bankrolls, squinted under magnifying glasses. Hoping. Searching. But the truth was, only a few could ever exist. And only one had survived in the condition that would make all the difference, because value isn't just about rarity. It's about timing. It's about condition. It's about the moment when the right eyes see the right thing. And when that happened, when this coin was authenticated, graded, and revealed, it stunned even the most seasoned collectors, not because of what it looked like, but because of what it was worth. After decades of silence, circulation, and survival, the little 1995 dime that no one had noticed was finally given the recognition it deserved. It wasn't just 10 cents anymore, it was worth $112,000.